Today's show is proudly sponsored by Rio, the premium activewear brand that's dedicated to making you feel your very best and your most authentic self. Use code INTUNE10 for 10% off your order today. Hey guys, and welcome back to the Intune podcast, where we discuss the music that makes us mindful. I am so excited about today's guest. I don't usually do this, but I'm actually going to read her bio for you guys because it is just packed full of amazing things, and I want you to know who you're listening to. So today's guest is Kathryn Agnes Huether, PhD. So Kathryn received her PhD in historical musicology from the University of Minnesota in 2021. She is currently a visiting assistant professor of musicology at Vanderbilt University's Blair School of Music. Previously, she was at Bowdoin College and was the 2021-2022 United States Holocaust Memorial Museum Jack, Joseph, and Morton Mandel Center for Advanced Holocaust Research and American University's postdoctoral fellow. A classically trained violinist, she studied with Angela Ahn of the Ahn Trio and vocalist. Huether continues to seek out performance opportunities and enjoys folk, klezmer, and bluegrass, and her primary areas of research consider how much music, or more broadly, sound, mediates modes of contemporary understandings regarding history, memory, discrimination, and trauma. This is so cool. I am so happy that you're here. Kathryn Agnes Huether, PhD, everybody.
I am forever changing. I don't mind rearranging. You've got to crawl before you walk. Routines I never bother, 'cause my mind can change by the hour, and I can live without a clock. Oh, don't you worry about me. Oh, 'cause I'm right where I should be. I'm doing just fine. Gonna paint my walls with my own design. Don't rush me, 'cause I'll be
Welcome. My goodness. That's not even like half of your bio, but like I have chills. Like you literally are like, you teach what I talk about on here, which is so cool. Do you want to tell me a little bit more about yourself and like tell everybody about yourself, like exactly like what it is that you've been up to like this whole time that you've been studying all of this? And I'm like honestly at a loss for words, because like I read your bio, like I know you and like we've hung out and I immediately wanted you to be on here, but like when I actually dug deeper into what it is that you do, so cool.
No, thank you so much, Ali. I mean, I feel so honored to be asked to do this, because it's kind of exactly what I hope that my research and work does as well. I really try to advocate for this sort of like public academics. And so this kind of fusion is definitely, so thank you for that. I mean, as academics, we have to write those big fancy bios and make us seem like all important. Yes, I've done those things, but I know I could sit and read yours too, and it'd be just as fancy.
It would not be just as fancy.
Well, the different layers. But I guess like breaking it down, music has literally been a part of my life since I was born. And I started playing violin at a super young age. My mom is, she's retired now, but she is a music teacher, public music teacher. And so I guess education too has always been a part of my background. My father was superintendent of schools. So always that layering there. And I don't, like we would spend these really long road trips actually to get to our violin lessons, my sister and I, because we lived in Montana.
Oh my gosh.
And when we first started playing violin, we studied in Billings, Montana, and we lived in Grass Range. And so if anyone's listening right now and you know where this is, that's like amazing. But it was 100 miles one way to get to our violin lesson.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And so my mom is a superhero that she literally drove us that far to start us. And but I think it just really showcased how important it was for education and this life beyond kind of the rural community that we had, and to engage with these other ideas. So that has always stuck with me. And by the time I was a senior in high school, I was going into Billings 3 times a week. We'd moved a little closer by that point, like 50 miles away.
Just 50 casually.
But my sister and I, we also both played So my mom had this requirement that we had to participate in every music thing of our school. And I had a class of like 19 students when I graduated. So it was very small. But in band, I played French horn.
Amazing.
And in violin, we would drive to Billings, and we participated in orchestra. And then my sister and I both sang in the choir. So we have all these kind of layers of musicianship. I do not play French horn anymore, but I did.
Could you if you needed to?
I don't think so. My embouchure is like totally gone now. Yeah.
I feel that. I am a person that like tried to pick up multiple different instruments, and I could not probably pick it back up to this day. Like at certain
I'm
ones,
sure some are.
Yeah.
But this is like the nature of the instrument though too. Like saxophone, I was able to pick up like pretty easily. I'm definitely not a good saxophonist, but just because of the way the instrument is set up, you don't necessarily. I mean, like, I feel if there's any saxophonists, I might be offending them right now, but just to start and get kind of a bass sound, it's a little bit easier. But French horn, no way, I can't do it anymore.
Oh man, that's so cool though. Your family is obviously very musical and also very education driven, which I think is awesome. I have my mom's a teacher, so I think we talked a little bit about that off camera, and so I have like such a high respect for teachers in general. So it's definitely not an easy job, and like every facet of any way that you look at it, it's a lot. So definitely such a cool thing to be a part of your family doing all of that, and that you carried it on with you.
Yeah, I really love it, and I always say like my parents are definitely the reason why I continued for education. I remember like I don't know how old I was, like maybe 10 or something, and I found out my dad had a master's degree.
Oh my gosh, you were like,
I'm like, oh, that's so cool, I want one. And then I kind of like researched a little bit more. I'm like, ooh, there's a degree higher than a master's.
You're like, oh,
like,
I'm gonna get that.
Yeah, it was really, I am going to be the highest educated in my family, and it was always kind of a little bit of a joke. And it was like, I'm gonna finish by the time I'm 30, and I did.
Yeah, I was gonna say because you're very young to have all of this like accomplishment in this field. So cool. Like, I mean, I'm always like, I was reading about you, but truly, like, I know that like your students absolutely love you with like truly like the reviews on your teaching is amazing, and then truly like even your peers, like it's just cool to see. Do you want to talk a little bit about like how you really like got into specifically what you're doing now?
Yeah, it's so funny. Everyone asks me that because it's so like nuanced. And I don't know. Yeah, growing up in Montana, again, I said like reading a lot. And I happened to pull this Holocaust studies book off the shelf one time in a library.
Yeah.
It was Night by Elie Wiesel, and I like after reading it, I'd never heard of the Holocaust or really engaged in Jewish tradition before.
Yeah.
And it kind of just sent me down to study more, but specifically music. And there are some Jewish composers too that have really been influential in how I've approached music as well, like Gustav Mahler in particular. And so I was just always interested in that facet. I was like, oh, there's something that I've never engaged with or heard about in my community. Like, I want to learn more. And when I went to undergrad, I got a music scholarship, and so I was majoring in violin, but as part of kind of the requirements, you have to take these humanities studies courses, and I took a class with this phenomenal professor that I still talk to today, Susan Cohen from Montana State, and she was just also a total badass, so I just hope to like I can be like her someday. But the way she taught religious studies, I was just like, oh my God, this is so cool. And asking these big questions that I didn't even know we could ask.
Yeah.
And so then I decided I was going to make all my humanities degrees be religious studies. And so that's when I double majored in the more academic side, but also the performance.
Yeah.
And so it just kind of continued like that. And I mean, when you go then to get a master's degree, you're forced to have a more focused study, and certain things led to one thing. And now it's, the kind of the huge nature of what I do. So
that's so crazy that you can have like truly there, like I can pinpoint certain people in my life that have taken me down a completely separate path than where I was going. And if I hadn't like met that person or taken a class with that person or like been in contact, like I would be in a completely different place now. It's so crazy how like just when people talk about it just takes one person to really absolutely change your life in so many different ways. Like that's so cool. That's so exciting.
And it definitely, I've been really fortunate to have these amazing professors at different points in my life. And I mean, yeah, Susan was very inspirational, but Angela On, that you read about my bio of the On Trio, also huge. And we still talk to her today. I texted her last night. And they just have, they're two very different people, but I can very much see how they embody life and how that kind of fused together in my own.
Very cool.
And I think at every stage in my education, I have these kind of key individuals that challenged me to think about the world and sound just really broadly, like what is it doing and what are the bigger questions that we can ask. So,
yeah, very cool.
Yeah.
I love that. What is your favorite class that you have taught so far?
Oh,
like subject wise.
Yeah. So I think like any time that I'm teaching, like that is my favorite class. It's mostly kind of defined by my students. I got to teach a course last year in the spring that I'd been really hoping to teach I'd proposed it at numerous institutions and numerous more applications. We don't have to talk about that, but it was called Voicing the Divine. And it was kind of a fusion of my background in religious studies and music, but we just looked at kind of the practices of voicing religious traditions really broadly.
Yeah.
So I kind of introduced it as literally an introduction to religious studies, but instead of, just reading a strict history, it was how are they actually communicating and using their voices within these and listening in turn. And I had this really wonderful group of students. I had 4 that were in the class. So it was a really small seminar, but 4 or 5. Sorry, I forgot one. 5. But they were all from different disciplines. I had 2 music students. I had an anthropology student. I had a freshman who hadn't declared her major yet. I had a math student. And so it was...
Yeah, just across the board.
Yeah, and it was exactly what I wanted because I think this happens too in academia, but I think in any profession, we get really kind of subsumed into one perspective. And especially from my background, like I really want to be interdisciplinary and to encourage more people to be interdisciplinary and to have that kind of reflection in my students and in the class was like the pinnacle. I was like, this is so cool.
Yeah.
And so I really hope to kind of take that with each application. But of course, there are courses that, this is strictly for music majors because it's a requirement.
Right.
And that's not a bad thing either. So it just kind of depends on the semester, but I love getting to design and engage with new topics for sure.
Yeah, that's so exciting. I know we were talking a little bit also off camera about how like all of your students come from so many different places and so many different they could be studying completely different things, and then they come together for this music thing, and it could be just because they're interested in it, or it could be because it's requirement. Yeah. So I think that's so cool that music in general is even in that forum, like bringing people together who are so vastly different.
Yeah.
Like it always does. But basically I just love that like you literally all day get to talk about how music is affecting people in the past and in the future and how we're using it. Can we talk a little bit more about like how you feel like right now? What are some examples of maybe some things that you feel like music is being used in like a positive way, and maybe some examples of how you feel like music is being used in a less positive way?
Yeah, that's a huge question.
Sorry, just gonna roll it out.
I think, really when it's breaking down like positive and negative, I think you can have the same sort of music that's achieving both ends. And we actually just talked about this at something in my class the past 2 weeks because we were looking at how the Nazi Party employed music, but on the other end also how the civil rights movement employed music.
Yeah.
And the manner in which both did so was actually very similar as far as driving like community factors and such. But of course, the result was drastically different.
Yeah.
And so I think that kind of case study is really demonstrative of like the power that music very much has. And it was also really fun. I always enjoy teaching this kind of juxtaposition with my students because it's like a light clicks on. They're like, oh, yeah, music is this beautiful community building thing, but community building can also be used for bad, essentially, as well. And we've seen that. We continue to see it today. And I think just to like really break it down and like reflect on, okay, what is the larger question here? Like, am I using my voice for a powerful and positive interaction, or to stand up for somebody whose voice is silent, or am I using it to kind of squander or silence somebody else too? And so I think in like social protest movements, we see this today. And I think it's even more difficult actually, because we see this, I mean, the way that music operates, we can use it in communities in person, but I think we see it far more on like social media. And it's so easy to silence or mute someone on social media and not get through. And so how is that community building interacting? And one example of this actually, and something that I've been working on a lot recently too, is like TikTok and the use of music on there, because you can have, the same kind of musical background for a whole slew of videos, but the video could be something really direct to, I mean, some of the research that I look at, right? Holocaust memory. So there can be accompanying a Holocaust survivor's testimony. They'll have this particular music, but then you click on the link to go to like the next music thing, and then it's a dog's birthday party with the same musical accompaniment. And I'm not saying that's necessarily a bad thing, but the fact that both of those engagements are underscored by the same musical example, it changes how we're perceiving and receiving it. So just
so like interesting to think about that. Yeah, definitely. And I think it's great because like I follow you on socials as well, and you definitely are constantly like advocating for people, and I think that's really special. And also like but making sure that you're asking questions. You're not like, hey, this is wrong or right. I like the way that you always approach things. You're just like, hey, maybe ask yourself how you feel about this, or maybe like take into consideration what this is doing, or hey, let's be more mindful about this certain situation. And I think that is such an amazing way to go about it, because too many people are telling you what they think you should think instead of saying, hey, are you internalizing this? Are you asking yourself these hard questions? And whatever answer you come with, hopefully that will make you a better person. But like, let's ask ourselves instead of let me tell you. And I think that's so cool.
Yeah, and not even just asking ourselves, but also like asking those around you. And I think as a white woman too, in particular, a huge lesson is to like learn when to be silent, and when other people can talk to you and you can just listen and engage as well. And I'm always trying to engage in that every day and reflect more on it. But I think too, just breaking down like things that we are just every day that we think are normal and that we use these phrases and such, but they actually might have a really complex and dangerous history, and to kind of check in and figure out how we can talk about it.
Yeah. And I do think like the only thing we can do is to continue to check in and to always be learning. Because there are things that like we were brought up with that we don't realize could have really negative connotations to it. And we've never known because we've never looked into it. And it's hard to, personally, I feel like it's hard to keep track with everything. There's just so much going on these days. So I feel like a lot of people will be like, oh my gosh, like I just have to shut it all out because there's just too much happening and I can't, be learning yet another thing. But I think if we're just open, like what are some ways that you think that would be good for people to kind of approach that if that's kind of like where they're at?
Yeah, I still think about this all the time and talk about it constantly. But one thing too that I always encourage my students, like you can't just say you can't say that if something is problematic, and to try and, if you're getting offended right away because whoever you're talking to is saying something that you think is discriminatory, racist, etc. And I'm not saying that it isn't, but to first like pause. And it's unfortunate that you have to, as a listener engager, to perhaps be the bigger person. But responding just, you can't say that, is just going to immediately turn whoever you're talking to away.
I feel like it's just like just constant triggers on both sides at that point.
Yeah, it's just like, no, you're wrong and you're putting them in this position. And to find a way to conversate about it and like, I think especially with my students in any class that I teach, kind of the core is to encourage conversation and reflection. And as musicians, I think the most beautiful thing about how we approach life is that we do have this special attunement to how we listen to the world. And to have this conversation then in these circumstances, be like, oh, well, yes, I mean, let's take what you said and actually, did you know this? Like, how can we engage with this? And one conversation that I've had recently is actually the continuation and usage of the word gypsy, which is actually really derogatory and has a whole history, particularly, but it's part of the Roma tradition. And this has drastically changed in like Holocaust memory, but most people don't know that complicated history, and they just continue to use it as like a bohemian free-for-all, etc. And it's hard to just, someone might just do it in passing. Like they want to say that they have that kind of vibe.
I mean,
but
even like also though, even like Halloween when people are dressing up like Esmeralda or something, like it's things that like we don't think about, you know?
Exactly. And I still have not found the answer as to how to address it. But I think anytime that you can sit down and say, hey, you said something that kind of hit me the wrong way, like, can we talk about it and just discuss it? And I certainly have like lashed out to some degrees at some point, and I've always regretted that. But just if you can communicate and have a conversation, then that's at least the best starting point.
Yeah, that's very much agreed. You said something on one of the pages on your bio, something about your voice is, what was it exactly? It was so...
I mean, your voice is your tool. I mean, it's the power that we have. I don't know if that's exactly what I said, but it is. Like that's how I want to curate my students' voices. That's how I constantly try to curate my voice. And it's the one thing that we have. And it can be physically right now as I'm speaking to you, but it's also on social media. It's in my writing. It's in that text you send to your mom in the morning. And to kind of check in and how are you using this voice in every situation.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. Oh my God. I have chills. Okay. So here on In Tune, we like to talk about songs that make you nostalgic, songs that maybe have like brought you up, made you as a person, or just really have hit you in a moment of you're walking through the store or driving your car and suddenly a song hits you and it just takes you to a place. Do you have any songs that really come to mind when I start talking about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think at the most basic level, like I brought up my sister and my mom and my parents already, but my engagement with music has very much been through, in particular, my relationship with Rachel, my sister. And one song that we'd always play together growing up was Amazing Grace. And we still, to this day, like that, we had this particular duet version for two violins that I was always kind of critical of, like, this is so boring, it doesn't sound pretty or like nuanced, you know. And we finally found this one that it doesn't matter how long it's been, we can both just pick up our violins and play it exactly as it was when we first learned it. I think she was 6 and I was 10 the first time we ever played it. So definitely Amazing Grace, and any version from that, it always, whenever I hear it, like I think of my sister, but I also think of my parents and everything that they did for me and like getting me to this point as well. So certainly that piece of music, I think, really stands out to me.
That is a beautiful song, and I like violin in any capacity is just like one of my favorite things, and having to play that, like, just so beautiful. Like, I feel like every single time you're talking, I'm like getting chills. It might just be today. I'm like, am I cold? What's going on? But chilly, truly, that is honestly, that is one of those like timeless songs that I don't know can be done poorly. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
like, it's just,
exactly.
It's just beautiful. And like, if you follow the notes of that one, it's just going to be in your head all day. And it's going to just be like this warm, fuzzy feeling for sure.
Yeah. And I think too, it's like so ingrained in our culture memory, regardless of what your religious background is or not. And I mean, Rachel and I have played it in so many different settings. I mean, we've played it at funerals, we played it at family gatherings, we played it at her senior violin recital at the very end. So, you know, it's, there's so many different manifestations, but like every time that we play it, it's like, no, that's my sister, my best friend, my duet partner. So it has, all these layers to it.
You got me there because I was like, oh.
I know, your sister means a lot to you too.
My sister's my best friend and my duet partner.
Yeah. Nevin's here too. Yeah, great sisters. Shout out to them.
Shout out, sisters.
Yeah.
Oh my God. No, truly though, like there's something very special about having a sibling that does music with you. And honestly, I unless you have that, it's hard to explain it to anybody.
Definitely.
It's just so cool because it's like they already know what's gonna happen, or what you're gonna do, like note wise, or what you're gonna choose to do because they would choose to do that almost.
Right.
Like, and it's kind of ingrained in our DNA, I feel like, to be knowing where that wave is gonna come and when we're gonna like hit certain harmonies and crescendo and pull back, and there's just so much in sibling music, I think.
Yeah, and I mean, it's just all those layers of like, oh, no one sees that fight that you got into beforehand, or this silence where you haven't talked for 2 days because it was so bad. But it is like you're like literally in tune with your sibling forever. And there's this like really cute picture that my mom shares every year of my sister and I sitting at the piano when she's like 3 and I'm 7, and we both have these bucket hats from like the 90s. But I think it just is so it exemplifies like the relationship I have with music, but also my sister, and it's really special overall.
That's so cool. I love that you have that memory. Okay, so Amazing Grace.
Yeah.
What is the next one that you think?
So it's kind of like a large scale big work. It's Gustav Mahler's Symphony No. 2.
Let's go. I'm so glad you're bringing this kind of thing. I don't know that one, but now I'm gonna have to go listen.
Well, if you have like an hour and 20 or something, then you can.
I could find an hour and 20.
It's it's also titled like, has a tone poem kind of around like the concept of the Resurrection Symphony. So it's the last movement is loosely based on the Book of Revelation in the Bible, which is like so complex history because Mahler was Jewish and converted to Catholicism.
Yeah.
So there's so many layers in that. But I think for the music itself, we played one of the movements, and I can't remember which one specifically, but I was in All Northwest my junior or senior year in high school. And we got to play Mahler, a movement from that symphony by Mahler, and then another movement from Dmitri Shostakovich's Symphony No. 5. He's a Russian composer. And both of these composers are from like the 19th and 20th centuries. And up until that point, I'd never really played like more contemporary music. I know it's not like 20th century, it's not super contemporary, but it's for the classical musicians, it kind of is. And I was just like, oh my God, this music is so cool. Like, it's so more interesting than Mozart, or like, Beethoven has some really exciting stuff too, but you have kind of this general corpus of music that you're constantly being forced to play. And I was just like, oh, classical music can be cool.
Yeah.
And that really like opened my eyes to a whole different presentation of musicians and composers. And I think it's particularly really cool that I'm now teaching 20th and 21st century music, because that was the point where I'm like, no, this music is cool. I want to engage with this more. So definitely like, I think that symphony as a whole, and I actually ended up writing my my senior undergrad thesis about it, for both religious studies and for music. And so it really has like a huge role in like shaping how I engaged with music more broadly.
That's so cool. Okay. I'll
send you my favorite version.
Okay, please do.
This.
Actually,
yeah,
please do, because I really do want to listen to it, and I actually really love classical music. I really do. I get more into like the like tabernacle choir kind of stuff. Like,
well, and there's a chorus part of the movement of the symphony too. So he kind of followed like Beethoven's cue and included a chorus aspect of it as well. So it's like a very cool piece.
Yeah. I love that. That's so exciting. Okay, I have to tell a story about when I first met you, and this is why No, I love it. This is why you're here, and like it kind of ties into your second song. The one thing that I absolutely loved that you said when we were just like sitting there chatting, we had just met, and you're just like, yeah, I just like to talk about how like Beethoven, Mozart, like these are all just like regular dudes. Like you were like, they're talking about them like they were like here with us and just like hanging out, and like they had their flaws too, and like all of these different things, and really making these people who like really truly everybody I think in their head has pedestal.
Yeah.
Just really human. And making them feel normal. And I loved that. And I know that you teach that to your students, which I think is so cool. And then you started talking about how there was just so much music out there from that time that we don't get to hear.
Yeah.
And you kind of touched on it just now about because these were men who were like maybe new people, like today, how there are so many people in industries that get to where they're going because they know people, and that's why you hear their music and you don't hear some other people's music. And can you talk a little bit about that? Because when you started talking about that, I was just dying. I was like, this is amazing.
Yeah, I mean, they probably would have loved to have been at that brewery with us. Well, maybe, and like, sure they did. I know, and Mozart liked to party.
Just having a beverage with Mozart casually.
Yeah, but I think, for sure they are real people. Like, they lived and experienced life in similar ways that we did and do. And so I think to remember that, because in particular in classical music, but I think we do this with as artists and musicians, like we see or hear about somebody and we're like, they're amazing. And I think this kind of like it's like a godlike tendency. And honestly, you can see this with like Taylor Swift or something in fans today. Like it still correlates, but that they really are just people and they're singing or composing about things from their real lives and trying to make money and live. And so I too have to like remember to do that. But yeah, like as far as there is so much music that we don't hear or and for numerous reasons. I mean, one, we just might not have a lot of the compositions anymore. Like that's I think most easy pinpointing element. But then there's all these layers too of like identity politics and like who is writing history that we need to remember. And I always like to use Mahler as an example because he did have a hugely complicated life and his relationship with music. He was born into a Jewish family at the end of the 19th century. He was trained in the Western style classical music. He was very talented. He kind of idolized Richard Wagner, who has a huge role in music history, but also kind of anti-Semitic as well. And so there's all these complicated layers. But in Vienna, where Mahler was at the time, there was this huge resurgence of anti-Semitism at the turn of the century, 1920th. And even though he was hugely talented, because of his Jewish background, he wasn't able to get the kind of job opportunity that he deserved. Yeah. And so that's why a huge part that he converted to Catholicism and to take on these roles. And so then his music was heard a little bit more broadly, but there's still criticisms from music critics writing about it. And then, you have the change in history too with the Nazi party and like banning those musicians and composers. Yeah. And then there's kind of this resurgence in the 60s when Leonard Bernstein comes and kind of brings Mahler back to Vienna, brings him back to the stage. And so there's all these different layers. And most of these layers actually Mahler doesn't have anything to do with. Like he can't control over how his music's being listened to. And so I think as historians, like this is our responsibility to kind of figure out these nuances and like how we engage with it at present. But to figure out, why isn't this music being played? And one of the questions I always ask of my students, they have these like listening worksheets that they have to do for every single unit. And I know a lot of professors kind of give them like, this is the body of listening that you need to write about, that you need to know. And I agree that there is, we do need to know like Beethoven's Fifth and like these backgrounds. But again, there's so much more music out there. And my students have introduced me to music. And so I let them pick the music and then they get to like argue about why it should or should not be in the canon. I love that. And I love some of my students' responses. They're really going for it, but they've introduced me to a lot of new music. And so I think anytime that, I'm like, oh, what should I teach now? Or who should we pay attention to now? And it just changes every year. And I think one of the things that like Blair School of Music does really well is to showcase some of these individuals. Right now we have we just finished this series with Florence Price, who is a Black American female composer who really didn't get her due when she was alive. And her music is not becoming like, it's not having this resurgence, but it definitely is being played more. And I think reflecting on that, like who can we shed light to that deserves to be like.
Absolutely. I also often think about how, like, if you go back into history during that time, there were probably so many people who just never got the opportunity to, like, honestly, even females. Could you imagine if we had, like, a lot of female composers, like, back in the day, just, like, absolutely creating these beautiful symphonies? Like, it would sound completely different.
Oh, yeah.
It would be crazy.
So many layers would sound completely different because, I mean, just think of, like, the social circumstances that would have had to change to allow those female composers to even exist.
Right.
And I always get kind of angry about this criticism, like, when we want to broaden it to female composers, and then people will say, like, oh, well, you know, I would teach that, but it's just not good music. And I mean, sometimes maybe it's, like, not good as how we are kind of
used to hearing
discussing it, but I think I also want to push them and say, like, okay, who are the agents in creating music, and how can we break this down? Because there are a lot of, like, female patrons from times of, like, Felix Mendelssohn or Bach or Beethoven that really had active roles in how music was being performed, as far as, like, maybe they organized the event, maybe they were a muse. I don't really know, like, that necessarily, but, you know, there's so many layers to it. There's, like, Felix Mendelssohn in particular, his great aunt, Sarah Levy, was a huge patron in, like, the Berlin Enlightenment and musical scene, and had kind of this contribution with J.S. Bach's music getting distributed. And so, like, how can we break it down and, like, look more so, you know, women were doing music, but just in a different way.
Yeah.
And, like, we can't go back and change the social circumstances to help them learn and engage, but they were still there. Like, how can we change our kind of perspective on how we're including them?
Right. That's such an interesting thing. Like, things that I just will pop into my head briefly, but I don't really think too long about them. So, like, it's so interesting to me.
That's my problem. I always think too long.
You're
about
like,
them.
I'm just sitting here thinking about it all day long.
What can I do to change this? Yeah, no.
But it's true. Yeah. And I think, like, you could bring a lot of that to, like, what's happening now still. Like, hey, like, these circumstances could be better, you know, for certain people, and what we can do to change them.
Oh, wait. And I think too, like, this kind of, like, genre monitoring or such, like, you have a particular image or thing about how an artist should look or sound to fit into a particular style or genre, and that always makes me angry too. I'm like, no, they can do whatever they want, like, but it's because we have these kind of cultural foundations that are built up so intensely, and then we're not willing to, like, check in, like, does that even matter? So, yeah.
I do think we're slowly starting to break down those walls. I'm seeing I've talked about this so many times on here now, like, so many really amazing genres that are just being blended and just, like, creating their own new subgenres and just, like, absolutely so excited to listen to all of the different things that pop off here.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, like, a huge part of that too is, like, I mean, there's both bad and good things about streaming services, obviously, but something that's really cool about Spotify is that you can just put on a shuffle and you can have that genre blending just through your headphones. And I think that is also an inspiration to coming of age musicians and to hear that, oh, like, I don't need to just fit into this style. And, like, I really love playing folk and bluegrass style of music, but growing up was very strictly, you need to play violin in this way to sound like this classically trained. And once I realized, like, I didn't need to do that, like, I can make my own sound and I can blend across disciplines, that's the cool thing.
You know what I do find very interesting along those lines is that when I was younger and I first started in music, I didn't know any other way other than to do it exactly like you just said. Like, you are to copy paste what this person did to repeat it. And that can be cool in a lot of ways because there's something so special about being able to follow along and really hear it the way it was meant to be heard. But even when I was taking piano lessons, things like that, my teacher used to get so frustrated because I wanted to play it the way I wanted to play it. I was like, okay, I'm going to play it this way, but then I want to play it a little bit more like this because that's where my heart is going. But it was like a no. So I wonder how many people started like we did, playing like that, who could be these amazing musicians who just wanted to be doing their own thing and, like, got stopped because they were feeling so pressured by needing to copy and paste what the other person did instead of creating their own things and being guided a little bit more along those lines of, like, hey, why don't you learn this, but like, because it's important, but also why don't we go over here and like, why don't we teach you a little bit about how to do your own thing, like how to really just like be able to listen to your own gut feelings and create yourself, because that's really what they were doing anyways.
Yeah, exactly. And
you know,
and I kind of want to pull out one element that you said there too, like our teachers telling us, no, we need to play it this way because that's how it's supposed to sound. But most of the time, especially with classical music, like, do we actually know? Because, there's these intense musicologists do like amazing studies to, notate bowings and such in the particular way to reflect like Baroque style and such.
Yeah.
But we literally do not have recordings of how it actually sounded.
Yeah.
And, this could be anywhere from how the concert hall was structured. Like Baroque orchestras were so much smaller than like what we have now. There's so many layers to that we don't have any idea actually of the concrete formats. And so, there should be that degree of blending and musicianship. That's what it is, to bring yourself into it.
Yep.
And I mean, the first time that I was like, that I improvised, I was just like a statue. It was so uncomfortable for me and I wanted to cry. I felt like embarrassed. I needed my sheet music. It was like my shield. But the more I did it, the more fun I had. And I have this really amazing friend. He's like off in New York doing his cool stuff, Avery Bellata. But he's the one who forced me to be like, Kathryn, stop. Just like, I'm just going to play something and you answer me with your violin.
Yeah.
And so he really helped me like build that up. But I also think learning to improvise and be more free like that also transferred into my everyday life as well, like to be more experimental and open and reflective about what's going on around me and to like ask bigger questions. And so I think there's so many layers, but that encouragement to engage beyond just the notes on the page is something that unfortunately is lacking in like early music education.
Yeah, it's very interesting, I think, too, because I do think in like there's so much out there right now, and I only want to touch on it because I don't know enough about it, but there's so much out there right now talking about how school systems are set up to have us just be like following rules and you do exactly what we're telling you, and if you can't fit in this box, then you're not doing it right. And so I think so many people who are like more like on the creative side and trying to really like escape that are put into this box of like that's not where we want you because you're not going to be like a good worker or something. So it's interesting that music kind of followed along with that path in a way of like, this is how you play this. Do not stray from how somebody else did it at first, when that person like really was just a musician themselves, just trying to figure it out. So I definitely encourage probably more early education to be like, why don't you try that? Like, definitely learn this, know what you're talking about, but why don't you try that?
I mean, I think there should just be a blend of both.
Like, absolutely.
Please be able to play Bach and like engage with the Baroque bowings and such, but then also, take your violin and just jam out with a friend or something.
You're supposed to lose yourself a little bit in music. That's why it's there. That's why people love it. Yeah. And you can feel that. So I think that's very interesting to kind of connect those dots a little bit. But okay, so I love that. I love that tangent. Do you have your third song that you think about?
My third song.
I almost forgot about it because I was going down that rabbit hole.
Back to my third song. Yes. So my third song is a minimalist piece of music by an Estonian composer, Arvo Pärt, and it's called Spiegel im Spiegel, which is mirror on mirror. And I first heard this piece of music when I was in an undergrad, and it was performed by our cello professor at some afternoon concert. And I don't know if you've engaged with minimalism a lot.
Not a ton.
It's kind of just this, it's like an 8-minute long piece of very similar, it's just drawn out a little bit. But it is so reflective, and I think particularly from just the title, like Spiegel im Spiegel, mirror on mirror, like it has that element. And some people, like my musicologist friends, are like, oh, that's so cheesy, Kathryn. It's like very commodified and used in a lot of films. But I literally, my grad school friends like refer to it as my floor floor talk song.
I love that.
Because sometimes I would just like be so stressed out and I'm just like, no, I have to put it on my record player, and I just like laid on the floor with a glass of wine and I would just play it on repeat, and it really gives me a pause to like check in and reflect. I still do it to this day. It doesn't matter at all. Like I'll put it on my headphones. I play it before any interview or before, you know, I did my dissertation defense, I put it on.
My goodness.
So that piece is really important to me.
Did you listen to it today?
I didn't. No, I wasn't so nervous today. So
Good. I'm
good
glad.
sign,
I was like, I don't
yeah.
want you to be. No.
No, it's more when I'm like kind of terrified and I just like need to check in, and it's like my, you know, it's like a work pump up song, but like not. It has like complete opposite.
I love that.
But just like, okay, you're okay, Kathryn. Check in. And
yeah. No, it's crazy. That's amazing how music can do that. It can kind of hold your hand through some scary moments, for sure.
Yeah, and that one is, I think, for me too, music is like picking 3 songs is so difficult because I know. Yeah, I mean, it's great, like reflection, but I'm also the type of person who will like curate seasonal playlists. They'll be like spring 2023.
Yeah.
And I really love being able to go back and listen to them, because then like you can kind of, there's certain songs that I relate to, you know, I got a job rejection here, or I was introduced to like a new favorite meal here, or, you know, you have these really visceral memories that are affiliated with it. But I love having pieces of music that you can kind of see have this long scale trajectory over your life. And Spiegel and Spiegel is for sure one of them. Yeah.
That's so cool. I love when songs follow you through your whole life, and they do change like that. And they have different meanings as life goes by. I was just watching something, I think it was like so random, but like it was like Dua Lipa and a few other people. Why can I not? It's fine. But it basically, they were like top writers in pop music talking about how when you write a song, it changes too. So like, and I always have felt this, so it was cool listening to somebody else who writes talk about it like that.
Yeah.
How basically when you start writing a song, you may not have even gone through it. Maybe you're writing it for somebody else, or maybe you're just like feeling those words that day and it almost comes out of you, like you don't know where it's coming from.
Yeah.
And then as your life changes and you're still singing these songs, you're like, oh my God, I feel like I wrote that for future me, because now I'm going through that. So I feel like even when you're listening to songs, they change, but when you write songs, they also change the meaning as your life goes on, which is very wild. I love it. Julia Michaels, that was the other person. Cool. It was like Dua Lipa, Julia Michaels. It was cool. It was a cool conversation. Yeah, so
that's awesome.
Yeah. But yeah, that's super, super cool. I love that. Floor talk. Yeah. Ugh,
but it's funny that they like call it floor talk, because I like don't talk. I mean, I guess I talk to myself a little bit.
You're like, it's fine. No, there's something so interesting about grounding yourself and literally physically being on the floor. Yeah. And listening to music and just really just like being in that, it's its own way of meditative state, I think. But I highly suggest that for people. Especially it's really nice if you have like a wood floor, if you have that, or even cement, like if it can reflect. I just love the acoustics of my vinyl playing, and the wine is just like there for like, I don't know. The wine is there because it's there. I don't usually drink it. It's just like sitting there in case I want it. I don't know. It's a comfort blanket. Yeah. The wine is the weighted blanket of your floor talk. Yeah, exactly. I love it. No, I love that so much. Oh, you brought something up earlier. This is just like a full circle. But I just thought of it again. The Spotify thing that you said. Oh yeah. So what I thought was cool about when you said that you like to listen to playlists from certain times, that's the thing I do like about Spotify, is that they give you your year in review stuff. It's fun. And I know people are very like up and down about, you know, the streaming services, and I'm right there with them. Like, it definitely needs to change. But I do think the way that they're introducing new music to people is pretty cool. And I do absolutely love that all of my friends who write music and are artists, when they do the Spotify like year wrapped, the numbers on my friends' music it's so much is amazing. And that was not available before. So I think it's really special and super inspiring to look at all of these artists who really probably wouldn't have been heard years back, have a full audience for themselves, and really be discovered, like you said, through playlists and things that you would have never heard before. And when I tell you, when people were posting their Wrapped, I was like, they are like being heard, like absolutely heard. It's beautiful. I'm so proud of everybody for just really taking their chances and throwing their stuff up there and really just being like, hey world, this is me. And like over so many different genres and so many different sounds, like they're really all using their voices. They're all standing up and saying like, you know, I really do want my stuff to be out there, whether I have a label or don't, or have management or don't. And like people are really just doing it themselves. It's so cool to see. And so I really do think that part of Spotify is pretty cool to see those numbers and to be able to share, you know, hey, like people are listening, and just even get that reminder. The money does need to follow.
Yes.
But the numbers are cool.
Yeah, for sure. I definitely agree. There does need to be like a reconfiguration in some way, but the numbers are always really fun, and it also like just reminds me of like, oh yeah, I do really like that song, or you know, there was that month in April where this was all I was listening to. I'm like, oh,
I was like, oh god, what was happening last November?
I'm like, oh shoot.
God.
But it's also funny, mine like will sometimes reflect, like I had Taylor Swift's Anti-Hero on mine, and it like kind of annoyed me. I'm not like, Taylor Swift is not, I think we talked about it. I'm not a huge fan, but I really respect like how she's navigated the industry and like used her platform to assist with other artists. But as far as music, it's just not my jam. But I taught it for one of my classes like a couple weeks ago on like how Spotify streaming is changing just literally how songs are made. And I used her Anti-Hero as an example because, you know, the kind of main chorus comes in at like the 45-second mark or something, and that's usually the point now, because that's the point where you need to like get paid. And so more artists are making them come earlier. But I listened to it so many times so that I make sure I had it like right for my students. And then Spotify Wrapped came up and it was like number 12 or something like. But I mean, I guess it reflects I'm a teacher, so it reflects the musician aspect to that. But
and you gotta listen to, and I love listening to everything. Like truly, like I think, and obviously you do that as well because you have courses. What was it that you said? Anything from you said somebody to Kanye. It was
from Wagner to Kanye.
I love that. That's true though. Like you really are teaching across the board. You're not just teaching like history, you're bringing it forward and making it relevant, which is,
and I think
cool.
Especially I try to do this for my students too, because like I said, yes, they want to be classically trained and perform and be a concert pianist or whatnot, and I really hope that those dreams come true to them. But we are seeing this more and more blending of genres, and they do need to be very versatile. And so if they can have these conversations across the board as well in far as music, like that's what I'm hoping to give to them.
Absolutely. Yeah. There's something really to be said about keeping one foot in history, but one foot moving forward, especially in music. Like, and I think that that's cool that that's what you're a part of, is just you still want to be reminded about, you know, where the music came from, but and all of the underlying layers, you know what I mean? But definitely knowing that it's okay to kind of test out new things and try new blending and feeling your feels through it, you know?
Across the board. For sure.
Otherwise, we'll just be very bored.
Yes, and no one wants boring music.
No, exactly. Exactly. Okay, so I'm going to start giving you some of my wrap-up questions because they take long too. Okay, so when do you feel you're most authentic?
Oh, this is a hard question. Well, I think I need to immediately respond, because if I ever have like past or future students listening to this, they'll be like, oh, Dr. K's a hypocrite. No. Because whenever a student says like, oh, this is a very authentic presentation, or like makes an authenticity claim, I'm like, okay, but what do we mean by that? And I think they try and sometimes they come across as like, this is the most original or like pure form. And that's really not it, because there are so many different forms of authenticity, or like what can be authentic. And I see this in myself too, like just showing up and being me on that day, or like checking in like, okay, this is what I'm doing. But I think tying it back to like how we're engaging in conversations, I think that's where I'm like, I always find myself being most authentic is like, I see myself as being this like malleable puzzle piece. Like nothing like, oh, I'm just Kathryn and this is me. And so if you don't fit around me, then it's just like, you're not fitting into me.
Yeah.
But as humans, we have to change how we fit and to reflect around like, what does this person need to make this a better experience, a community? And so maybe one day being authentic is like, no, I'm using my voice and I'm using it really loud and I'm speaking up. But then the next day might be, oh, you actually don't need to say anything, Kathryn, because it's not going to help at all. Or, you know, someone else needs to say it, or, you know, just checking in that way. So I don't know if that fully answers your question.
No, I actually think that is like a very profound answer. I think that is probably what a lot more people need to hear. And I think that's awesome, truly. Like, and I do think that you're incredibly authentic when you're talking. I've never been in a conversation with you where you're like, where I'm like, she doesn't believe that. You know what I mean? Like, I'm like, no, she's full. And you don't say things when you don't have to. Yeah. So, I think that's very accurate for you, actually.
and I think too, sometimes I will leave a conversation, and I guess for me to be most authentic is anytime when I walk away and I feel very comfortable with myself and I feel proud of how I interacted in that situation. And I get really disappointed in myself if I walk away and I'm like, oh, you didn't stand up for yourself, or, you know, you didn't need to say that actually. And like having that kind of check-in that I should have done in the moment rather than after the fact.
But the fact that you're even saying it after the fact is like so much more than a lot of people do. But yeah, and I think that a lot of the time too, I have to remind myself to be like gentle with myself in my own mind, because I really I go in on myself constantly. Too, like I need to be nicer to me in my head. But when you do walk away from those conversations and you're like, oh man, that maybe I was too malleable in that conversation. At least you're checking in, you're thinking about it, for sure. And I think that's a great answer. Yeah.
I mean, just like learning for next time. I think.
No, I think we all have to be. And especially with the authenticity thing, I think a lot of people, when they hear that question, they go immediately like, what do people expect me to say?
Yeah.
But I think it changes all the time. Like you said, like something that's authentic to me now might not be, you know, even from last season to this season, I've learned so much from everybody who's come on. And that's what I love about it. Like lifelong learner, gotta just keep you can't just stick in one place. But
I also think there are like multiple authentic Allisons or multiple authentic Kathryns.
For sure.
Like how I hang out with my sister and my brother-in-law, like totally different Kathryn than like Dr. K in the classroom.
Exactly.
Like, but I can still be my authentic self in both of those ways, but they are drastically different.
Yeah.
But I think that is, engaging and reflecting on your surroundings and be like, this is where what I can be and who I am. And but there's multiple versions for sure that we exist.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's funny because sometimes I'll be out with my friends and I'll be like having some wine and I'll be like, oh my gosh, like if I was on Intune talking right now, and like would this be a conversation that I would have? Probably not. But like it is, again, very authentic. And I don't think that really makes me, like you said, hypocritical, but I think it can be looked upon like that. But I also think that a lot of people are trying to fit things into a box, and it's just like, you're just living, we're just learning. You know, and for me, as long as my heart's in the right place and, you know, I'm following my gut feelings and my intuition and I'm going to a place that's hopefully making things better or enlightening, you know, for people, then I think that's where to go with that.
I totally agree.
Yeah, very cool. I love that.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for that conversation.
No, thank you.
Okay, so I think this is my new favorite question ever, but is there a lyric that you misheard when you were younger? Or even just now that you were like, this is definitely the lyric, and then you found out that was not the lyric?
I mean, I'm sure there are like a lot of these actually. And it's funny, like they don't really come out unless I'm, you know, dancing at a wedding or something. And I'm like, oh, here it is. And I'm like, oh no, that's actually not it. What? Or I get this sometimes where students will write about a piece of music and I'm like, from the late 1900s. I'm like, oh my God, I was not that long ago. But then they will like
excuse me, what?
But then they will literally include the lyrics in their paper, and I was, oh, that's what that is. Are you sure? So that has happened sometime, but I think, and one song in particular, it's like Calabria by Enur. It's Enur. And it was this mashup that came out in like 2007, 2008. It has like a saxophone solo. It's like, da, 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 da. Yeah, I did not sing that very well. But I still to this day have no idea what she's saying. And I like, it's like something like go figure around, da, 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 da. But like my friend and I would really sing it.
Yeah.
Like vocalize it in her car. And like jam out to it.
And you just like thought you knew what it was.
I had no idea. Like if it comes on, I'd probably try and sing it too. And I guarantee I can't even look up the lyrics because
it's too late now.
Yeah, it's definitely, I have no idea.
You're like, I actually don't ever need to know what the lyrics are. Please don't come up to me and tell me. I'm good with what I have in my head.
My high school self is just gonna, it'll come out at like maybe the next class reunion or something.
Oh my god, if you're out and you're singing it, can you please just like send me a video?
Yeah, if it ever comes on or something, or like maybe, if you come over, we'll play it.
Yeah,
you can witness
this
it.
rage and you'll be like, what do you think this says?
Yeah, I have no idea. Like, no idea. Maybe it's supposed to be gibberish.
Honestly, songs do that.
Yeah.
I've written songs like that. What is that one song? Work.
Oh, yeah.
I'm like, what is she saying?
No
I was
idea.
like, that sounds like, like when it first came out, I was like, that sounds like a demo that I did last week. Like just like throwing words out the wall and hoping for something cool. But then it got so stuck in my head.
Yeah. And you're like, oh, this is.
I was like, this is fire.
Another one I think too is like there's Have Nagila. It's like it's a Jewish song. The first time I ever heard it, I thought they were saying Ave Maria. Which is like two completely different things.
You were like, this does not match, and I do not know what's going on.
And still, I don't remember the recording that I listened to, but I'll play it. I'm like, it sounds like Ave Maria to me. And I don't know, it's probably a reflection. Yeah, I don't know. So it's all the time. I think too, like studying anything in foreign language, you always have
Yeah. And you speak, how many languages do you speak?
I can do German, but I can read Yiddish and then a little bit of Polish, but like not very well. I wish I was better at it. Yeah.
You used to go to Germany. Do you still go to Germany?
I haven't since the pandemic, unfortunately, but it's definitely on my list because one of my book chapters like hugely engages with Berlin. So I'm hoping to do that in the near future. But yeah, I did. I mean, my dissertation research, I got to spend like 5 summers and like a fall there, and I love Germany. I love Berlin.
So cool.
My partner Tyler, he'd be like, "Oh my god, don't get her talking about Berlin," because it's my favorite place.
What's your favorite part about it?
Oh, I mean, everything. I don't know.
She's like, Berlin is everything.
Berlin is everything. But it's actually funny. Like, I've never done any of the, like techno clubs or that kind of scene.
Yeah.
I like the coffee shops. I like the general vibe. I love being able to walk. The public transport is wonderful. Like, also everyone dresses in like these dark, moody colors, and that's also really my vibe.
I love that.
They have a lot of parks, which is really cool. So I have a really good friend. He visited me one summer, and we went on like park hopping.
That's fun.
And Sundays, like nobody does anything in Germany. Like you do not show up to work. You don't check your email. That's super cool to me. I wish that kind of work-life balance was more reflective in America.
That would be amazing, wouldn't it?
It would be amazing. Sometimes I delete my email from my phone just to, give myself an hour and then re-download it. Like,
honestly.
Yeah.
Hello, America.
Yeah.
We just over here working.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, my goodness. Okay, so second to last question. Who is an artist, composer, somebody that you think really needs to be heard more that people aren't paying attention to as much as you think that they should be?
Yeah, this is an incredibly difficult question, I think, as well. And I don't think I can give a specific name, but maybe tying it back to my conversation about when I ask students to, make an argument as to why it should be in the canon. I think it's really that to like continue to explore and find new artists and give them their platform alongside all these age-old artists that we've held to such high standards.
Mm-hmm.
And to just add, every semester too, I like make sure that I include artists that I've never taught before.
Yeah.
And so for me, that's like most important. And I will include some, that were introduced in the past. For a while, I was really on this huge kick of like, I must include Hans Eisler, who is this German Jewish composer. And then another one like Paul Robeson. He's a Black American artist, and he doesn't really get kind of his time of day because there's a huge thing with like McCarthyism and being affiliated with the Communist Party, and so there's all these like historical layers, but I think just exploring and talking about those individuals in the same way that we would sit here and talk about Mozart and like, but don't compare them to them. Like, I think one of them, Florence Price, like I brought up, her music is amazing, but I don't want to say like, oh, she's the Black female Mozart. That's not at all. That's not a standard or comparison that we should even engage in. We need to see them for who they are and like what they are offering to this larger world that we have of musicking. And so just always continuing to explore and making sure that we're including voices that are perhaps absent or not getting their time. And I know there's a lot of artists that I could like heighten right now, but
I think that's great, and you gave us two, like definitely at least to listen to for sure. And I think I thank you so much for that, because so many people that I bring on here are very like pop or country or folk and things like that, and I think it's really cool to have a little bit of a different taste come through. So I think that's very special and very cool. I want to know. This is the last question. Okay. I promise. Okay. No, so I want to know where it is that we can find everything that you're doing. You have a book, like
I mean, not yet, but
you're working on a book.
I have drafts in my computer. So please don't steal my computer. That's where you'll find my book.
I'm so excited though I'm excited to read it once it's out. And are you planning on do you have like a set date and time, or are you just kind of like when it comes out, it comes out?
So it's like under review by a public, not like the book itself, but the proposal is under review. So I mean, it's a huge process in academia to get it like to the publication date, but if it gets approved, then it'll be like maybe 3 years from now that it comes out, which is crazy to me because it's also like my dissertation work. So it's like, honestly, I think of it as like a life's work. I'm like 33 years old, but it's like 10 years in incoming. But I do have some writings that are out already, and any of it you can find on my website, kathrynhuether.com. And there's like, the writing and publications page. So I've linked all of that on there. But I'm also just happy to like send anything over email. You can just Google me, and my that it sounds so like conceited. You can Google me, but like my Blair, it'll link to like the Vanderbilt website and Blair, and my email address will be there. And I think it also has my website linked to that too. My Instagram page has it linked as well.
You do like you go and you speak on things like this at like conventions and things like that.
I mean, as in academia, it's kind of expected to give these kind of conference presentations, but this year it was for me like kind of the peak in my career, because I was asked to be on this Jewish Studies and Music panel with these 3 other scholars that I literally looked up to like my entire career. Like and there's this one in particular, her name's Ruth Ha-Cohen, and she's kind of this revolutionary academic contributor to how Jewish music and studies is looked at, and I got to speak on the same panel as her, and that was so cool to me to be asked to be there. And I'm getting some invitations. I'm speaking at a conference in April as well, so it's really cool to be like able to voice and give my platform in this way. But
that's very cool. And like, can people just show up and be a part of this, or do you have to be invited? I'm just so curious.
I wish they could just show. You do have to. I mean, I have snuck my like boyfriend and my dad in sometimes. It's so funny. My dad did come to one of my academic talks. He's like, "Oh, that's what you do. Very interesting." And, like, and he meant it all in love, but he's like, "Oh, weird."
Yeah, that's
because you literally just like get up and read this paper, and it's kind of old school. But you can't necessarily just come to conferences, but I am hosting 2 events at Blair next semester in spring 2024. I'll make sure to give you the details. But like my violin professor will be here, so we're doing a mix of a lecture concert series.
That's so cool.
And then I'll get to go back to Montana State next year, and we're going to do it again. And Susan Cohen, who I mentioned, she's going to be there and be like the moderator. So I'll have these 2 women that I've very much looked up to, like be able to be a part of it as well. And so those are generally open to the public as well.
That's very cool. Okay, well, I can't wait to see what else that you accomplish and do, because my God, it's like truly something to look up to, and you are absolutely crushing it in your field. And I think that that's so amazing. And I'm so happy that you came on.
Well, thank you so much for having me. And
absolutely.
It really is special to like be able to talk to a wonderful musician.
Literally
and
anytime that you want to come back on, I know we're going to hang out outside of here.
Yeah.
But like anytime you ever want to come back on and chat, or if you have something new going on, we would love to have you back. And, oh my goodness. I feel like I have so much more to say to you still, but like, I'm just like, maybe
behind the scenes.
Yeah, no, but truly, I think, I think that, you've definitely brought a new perspective on here to Intune, and I highly suggest that everyone goes and checks out her website, because you have like your students' work is on there as well, right?
I mean, yes, and so many students who also did incredible projects like I haven't featured, but my website really tried to showcase the kind of variety of student work. I have this amazing documentary that 2 students made as part of my film music in the Holocaust course. I have some podcasts. I have this really cool, like, curated soundscape by 2 students of soundscape, just like of a community that they were part of. And so there's reading stuff. You can look at more traditional paper-like stuff, but then there's also cool stuff like a podcast, a film. There's a lot of stuff to check out.
So
and those students are going to change the world. Like, I just had the privilege of teaching them for like 1 semester, but they're doing great stuff.
That's honestly, I love that. But like, the thing is, like, I always tell people, you don't realize how many people that you're contributing to their life, and then you look back, and like, people will always remember that you're the person that taught them to think like certain ways, and
I
to
hope I'm the small part.
to question themselves. No, I think that's so cool. I think that's like, teachers don't get enough credit for that. And I think that that's such a special thing to have, and you definitely use it wisely. So thank you so much for coming on to Intune. My goodness. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Definitely check out Kathryn. She is amazing. Go check out her website, and we'll definitely link the book eventually when you pull it out. And thank you guys so much for coming back to Intune. We'll see you next time.
I am forever changing.